reasonable person.
I've always liked Norse mythology, and no Norse god intrigued me more than Thor, the god of thunder. I think Thor's the best god out of most mythologies. He's way better than Jesus, at least. I know some of you will be mad at that, but to be fair, Thor is jacked. Well, Thor is swole. He drinks all the time. He has a hot wife, 2 badass sons. He kills giants. While Jesus, although bearded, which is always a plus, got friend-zoned by a prostitute and is like super skinny. And he only has abs because he's skinny. Anyway, jokes aside, I suppose many people are a bit upset with God of War, Ragnarok's depiction of the God of Thunder himself. And you could maybe attribute some of that to the MCU's Thor, who is very jacked, very handsome, skips legs, while this version of Thor is less handsome, not as jacked, but more swole, and doesn't look like he skips legs. Although many people's criticisms usually is relegated to he's too fat. How can a fatty beat Kratos? How is he going to be intimidating? Well, let's talk about that. First, what is strength? Strength can be defined as many things. In this case, we are going to define muscular strength as the result of 2 factors: muscle mass and neural output. Muscle mass meaning the amount of muscle you have, and neural output is the neurological ability to recruit as many muscle fibers as possible to produce force. What's curious is that most bigger individuals tend to have more muscle mass than smaller individuals, despite carrying more fat as well. Of course, this depends on training level, as if you are a beginner, you will not have as much muscle mass as an advanced lifter. So, obviously, a tubby guy who just started lifting is not going to have as much muscle mass as an advanced lifter. But if they're on the same training level, they should have more. Anyway, let's talk about force. Force equals mass times acceleration, and in equations where both factors are multiplied together, an increase to either factor will increase the solution of the equation, meaning force in this case. So an increase in mass or acceleration will increase force. There's nothing in this equation saying it needs to be more muscle mass. Obviously, more muscle mass would help, as, you will have more control over that. But just referring to mass, it doesn't need to be muscle mass in the equation itself. Now, how does this work? Well, there is a concept known as kinetic linking or kinetic chains. This means your ability to strike or produce force starts at the feet, travels through the legs, through the hips and the torso, and out your arm to produce force. Typically, this dramatically increases the force you can produce than if you just used your single focused limb. This can be seen in fighters, it can be seen in lifters, and the more mass you have, if your technique is down, the more force you can produce. Look at baseball swings, look at a push press in lifting, and many other lifts, obviously. Look at a punch or a kick. If you have the correct technique where you're using your whole body to produce force, mass will help you produce even more than just your musculature can provide in and of itself. This is why you can lift more in a push press than a strict shoulder press, because your whole body is involved in creating an energy chain to increase the amount of force you can produce. Now, to build muscle, one requires a surplus of calories and difficult enough resistance training. Of course, the source of your calories, whether it is from proteins, carbs, fats, and alcohol, and the ratio of all of those will determine how easy or difficult it is to gain muscle. Obviously, muscles are made of proteins, so ingesting more protein will be beneficial. However, if you were just eating a bunch of carbs, you would still increase muscle mass. However, protein is a bit better. When trying to gain muscle, it is not uncommon to gain some fat along with it. As well as, it is not uncommon to lose some muscle when you are losing fat. Depending on how you approach your muscle gaining phase, and your cutting phase or leaning phase as well, how much calories you increase or decrease will determine how much fat or muscle you gain or lose. Let's focus on gaining for the remainder of this, as we are talking about Thor, who is a bit thick. There are two ideas when it comes to bulking. There is a dirty bulk, in which you pretty much eat everything in front of you without caring about what's in it. And there is also a lean bulk, or clean bulk, depending on what term you want to use, where you are in a small caloric surplus, so let's say 200 to 500 calories more than your maintenance, and this will allow you to better control how much fat you gain with your muscle. When you dirty bulk and you have the intention of leaning out, it makes it more difficult as there will be more fat to get rid of, thus putting more of your muscle in danger of being lost when you go into your fat loss phase, while when you do a lean bulk, you are controlling the amount of calories you're intaking better. So, hopefully, if you do this correctly, you'll gain less fat, maybe a little bit, and it'll be much easier to shed that off when you go into a fat loss phase, so you lose less muscle while you're trying to lose your fat, which is great. Both have their benefits. A dirty bulk tends to be faster. You see results faster, but you have to cut harder, while a lean bulk is a bit slower, but your cutting phase is a bit easier. There is also a term coined by Alpha Destiny called bear mode, which is a lean bulk, but more. This bear mode phase tends to make you look a lot bigger in clothing. So people who are natural and aren't gifted with size tend to look smaller in clothing. This method he coins essentially focuses on the muscles that make you look big, so you end up looking bigger in clothing, which is something we all want. We all want to be accused to being on steroids, whether we are or not. It's a huge compliment. Anyway, there are benefits to being big when it comes to strength. Obviously, the bigger you are, the more mass you have, the more force you can produce, like I said before. But even people who are leaner and are very strong tend to be very big. Larry Wheels, despite being very lean, still weighs 270 pounds. He's a big boy. And, not to mention, that typically stronger people tend to be taller, as when you are taller you have more room to pack on muscle. If you're 5'6", you will look jacked sooner than someone who is 6'5", as they have more room to build out that muscle. You don't. Of course, being shorter is cheating, because as far as strength goes, you're not moving the weight as far. While being taller, you do have to move it over a longer distance. So, there are benefits to being taller, and there are benefits to being shorter. Hopefully, Thor is taller, as we don't want him as a dwarf, okay? We want him as a very tall and big man. Anyway, being bigger does not always mean better. Of course, if you're 400 pounds and you deadlift 800 pounds, that's really impressive. But if you're 200 pounds and you deadlift 800 pounds, that's more impressive. So, although being bigger typically means you're stronger, doesn't mean you're the strongest pound for pound. You might be a world record deadlifter at like 400 pounds, but the guy deadlifting 800 pounds when he weighs 200 pounds is more impressive than you deadlifting 1,000 pounds when you weigh 400 pounds, if that makes sense. But of course, a lot of weight is a lot of weight. It's still impressive. Just saying bigger does not always mean stronger pound for pound. In fact, rather, it means the opposite in many cases. Another reason why size is not always great is because of endurance. The bigger you are, the more weight you have to carry over distances or over time. So if you have a long fight or a long run, you do have to carry your weight for the entire duration of that. It is why when you look at a sprinter compared to a long distance runner, the sprinter is usually more muscular. They're not huge all the time, but they are usually much more muscular than the cross country runner. And you can see this with actual sprinters. You can see this with running backs. A lot of them are very big and muscular guys, and they move very quickly as they have all that musculature to propel them forward. But if you put them in like a several-mile run, they will probably do fine, but it would be much easier for the smaller person to do that run. A lot of this has to do with the type of training they do, but size is not very beneficial for endurance. Now let's look at Thor's design.
How come they're the strongest in the world, but they don't have abs? Abs is not a sign of power. It's just the sign you don't eat enough.
I think the main reason people are upset with Thor is that he has this big old belly. And this costume obviously doesn't help, as all your attention is attracted right to his belly, where I think he would be better off if he had no shirt and just bracers. He would look better if he had armor covering his belly and chest and nothing on his arms, maybe just the bracers. But they went with the weirdest design, which brings your attention right to his belly. Of course, in the myth, he eats a ton, like a ton, so he would most likely be bigger, but I don't know about this costume. But if you look at him, really focus, if you look at his shoulders, his hands, his arms, you can't really see his legs because he's wearing baggy pants. But these are all very thick and muscular looking parts of his body. So we can assume that he's more a high level strongman build than just a fatty. Now, of course, many people might equating Thor to Endgame Thor, and where Endgame Thor is a depressed piece of shit who the movie makes fun of because Thanos took everything from him and he got depressed and fat.
Why would I be scared of that guy? I'm the one who killed that guy, remember? Anyone else here killed that guy? Nope. Didn't think so.
At all. I am hoping that they don't do this with God of War, because I really like Thor, and this game could be crap. They could shit all over Thor, but I'm hoping they don't, and that they really make him powerful and intimidating. You don't need to be jacked to be intimidating. You could just be really big and strong and be intimidating. But as far as his design goes, he has a lot of markers to show that he is a very strong boy. In fact, it just shows that he's a very big and strong being in general. So, hopefully they don't waste that. To wrap this all up, maybe it's the media that makes people think that strength is only relegated to those like Arnold or Ronnie Coleman. And while they are very strong, strongman competitions are also full of insanely strong people who just don't want to enter a bodybuilding competition. They can pull 44,000 pound planes and make a 400-pound rock look like it weighs pretty much nothing. Being fat doesn't make you strong, but being fat also doesn't make you not strong. Your training does. Your diet does. Your work ethic does. And there are indicators to show that you may be strong despite your belly. Arms, shoulders, back, hands, legs. I think it's a bit presumptuous to assume that Thor can't fight Kratos just because he's fat. So, on some level, I think people need to calm down and wait for the game and judge the game for the game. It might be great, it might be crap, who knows? But everyone's being reactionary when there's no need to be. It's fine. I think Thor looks really cool. I just wish his armor was a bit different. Anyway, that's the video. Coaching, merch are in the description. Tactical and ex-tactical populations get priority spots in coaching. Other than that, fill out the application. Maybe I have a spot open for you. Maybe I don't. But until next time, I appreciate you watching. See you later.